also a way to send a signal to the rest of the world that the international rules-based order is essential, and that we want to defend the UN Charter and the principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity, because if not, this is making all of us more vulnerable, and this is making the world at risk. Point 3, the global challenges. Climate change, digital, we can see that there is a transformation of the economic paradigm, and it means that we have to work on those topics with partners all across the world. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that one thing was clear yesterday at the level of the leaders. All of us, we agree that the challenges we faced yesterday are not different today. These are the same challenges. And all of us, we agree that we have started many months ago. It started in Versailles. Paradigm, and it means that we have to work on those topics with partners all across the world. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that one thing was clear yesterday at the level of the leaders. All of us, we agree that the challenges we faced yesterday are not different today. These are the same challenges. And all of us, we agree that we have started many months ago. It started in Versailles, followed by Grenada in Spain, and under the Belgian presidency in April, with again the occasion to identify our common challenges. In June, before the summer, we have agreed on what we call our strategic agenda. In fact, this is the plan, the EU plan to address those common challenges. And here we see a few priorities. The first one is competitiveness. And today, this morning, we had the occasion to have an exchange of views with Mario Draghi and with Christine Lagarde. Nous avons eu l'occasion ce matin d'avoir un échange de vues sur.
This morning we had an exchange of views on competitiveness. I could summarize the discussion by saying that there is a wide consensus in the European Council to the effect that we have to set a top priority, reducing fragmentation and improving integration on two key issues: the internal market. We have to deepen the internal market. Mario Draghi pointed out in particular that the digital technology sector needs deepening of the market, and the same applies to services.
Egy másik téma a tőkepiac témája. Hosszú ideje mondjuk, hogy a szétraprózódást meg kell szüntetni, és a vállalatok helyzetét meg kell könnyíteni, hogy hozzáférjenek hozzá tőkével, amellyel beruházást, innovációt tudnak végrehajtani. Azt hiszem, hogy a mai vita is megmutatta, hogy mennyire sürgős témáról van szó, hogy előre kell haladni a tőkepiacok tekintetében, hogy a megtakarítások, beruházások unióját meg kell valósítani. Aztán még valami, amiről szeretnék beszélni.
En directo, el presidente del Consejo Europeo, el belga Charles Michel, desde Budapest, dando cuenta de esa reunión informal de líderes de Estado, de jefes de Estado y de Gobierno de la Unión Europea, y con algunos mensajes muy claros a propósito de esa victoria de Donald Trump. Uno, que ha llamado a Donald Trump y que lo han felicitado las autoridades europeas, él en calidad de presidente del Consejo Europeo. Dos, que tuvo una charla amistosa pero que hablaron de Ucrania. Y tres, ratifica el apoyo incondicional a Ucrania, porque lo importante es seguir defendiendo la soberanía de este país, la soberanía de la Unión Europea, y también decía Charles Michel que su prioridad, en este caso la prioridad de la Unión Europea, y lo hemos estado escuchando de varios líderes comunitarios a lo largo de toda esta mañana en esta casa, en Negocios Televisión, la importancia de seguir mostrando mayor competitividad en una especie de duelo de gigantes con varios actores internacionales, con Estados Unidos, con China. Europa no puede perder tregua, pero para ello es muy necesario, muy importante que todos estén unidos y que todos, muy importante, mensajes subliminales a otros líderes, todos deben hacer un esfuerzo, más esfuerzo, para seguir, en este caso, afrontando los retos del futuro. Retomamos conexión con Budapest, con Charles Michel y con Ursula von der Leyen y con Viktor Orbán.
The European responsibility in that field, and it's also the occasion to discuss how we can reinforce the industrial basis in that field, because if we want to be credible in the field of the European defense in the future, we have also to support more development in the field of our industrial base in that field. Finalement, un dernier mot pour...
And just one last word to say that unity, trust are the key, the magic ingredients in terms of tackling these challenges. Creating trust, it doesn't happen on its own. It requires mutual confidence. It requires an effort to understand the other side, even when you don't agree. And I think this meeting of the European political community, or in the European Council, we have shown here in Hungary, in Budapest, we've shown that we can listen to each other and that we can look to how we can best move forward for a stronger, more resilient and more sovereign Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Madam President, President of the European Commission, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me also start by saying that I'm outraged by last night's vile attacks targeting Israeli citizens in Amsterdam. This morning, we have been informed by Prime Minister Schoof to get a full overview over the situation. I strongly condemn these unacceptable acts. Anti-Semitism has absolutely no place in Europe, and we are determined to fight it and to fight all forms of hatred. We want Jewish life and culture to thrive in Europe. Let me turn to the meeting here we had today of the informal meeting of the European Council. And first of all, I want to thank you, Prime Minister Orban, dear Viktor, for the outstanding hospitality and organization of this informal European Council. Budapest is well known for its history, but also for its hospitality. And indeed, I can confirm it is a famous hospitality that we're lucky to experience here. So thank you very much for that. And then, dear Charles, I also wanted to thank you. Today is your last European Council. And I want to thank you for all your work and dedication over the last 5 years, for your commitment to making the European project moving forward, despite the many, many crises and the heavy storms we went through together when we think of the pandemic and, for example, the Russian war in Ukraine, but many other difficult topics that have had to be solved. Dear Charles, today we're stronger than we were 5 years ago, and this is also your success. So thank you very much for these 5 years. Last night at dinner, we discussed the results of the elections in the United States. The United States is our biggest economic and trading partner. We share a unique historical bond, and our citizens share millions of friendships across the Atlantic. So it is important to build good relations with the new administration from the very beginning on. And this is how we will continue to shape the positive transatlantic agenda. I had the opportunity yesterday afternoon to congratulate Donald J. Trump on the phone early on. We discussed, among others, the topic of Ukraine and defense, trade and energy. And it was a brief discussion about these topics. And of course, I'm looking forward to develop these topics together. Today, our main issue was Europe's competitiveness. And we first of all mapped our strength. For example, that we compared with our main competitors have the longest life expectancy. We have an excellent education system that does not rely on the income of the parents. We have the lowest inequality between incomes, so a lot of social security. We have the biggest reduction of CO2 emissions, but we also know that we have areas where we have to improve our performance. And the basis of our discussion was and is the invaluable work of Mario Draghi. It is a year ago now that I asked him whether he could produce such a report looking at the competitiveness of the European Union. It was in preparation for the next cycle of the Commission. It was very well received, as you've seen over the last weeks and months since publication. And there's a broad consensus that this is the basis to discuss on and to move forward. What has increased is the urgency to deliver on the topics that are in this report. And it is absolutely impossible to describe it in full shape here, but let me give you a slight flashlight on 3 priorities. First, very clear from this report, we must close the innovation gap that we have with our global peers. Above all else, it's about diffusing digital innovation throughout our economy. We are very good in groundbreaking research, outstanding, but there is a deficiency in bringing the research results into a product and scale up the product on the market in the European Union. So there are still a lot of barriers to innovation and innovative startups that we see and that the report sees. So first priority must be to take down these barriers with simplification and speeding up. And as a first step, to cut red tape for these startups. We have already started to do that, but we want to go further. What the startups tell us, the innovative startups, they tell us that it is for them very cumbersome to go to the single market because they often face 27 different regulations they have to deal with. So we want to propose a 28th regime, which says that for these innovative startups, a single rule book, a simple and single rule book for the whole of the European Union is accessible. It's voluntary. We have around 182,000 innovative SMEs. So this will give them access to the whole single market and give them the possibility to scale up. The goal is indeed to use the full single market to scale up. There are many more tracks that we have to work on the single market. I will not go in depth now, but I just want to say that the letter report is very helpful here also as a roadmap for the way forward. The Commission will present in June its strategy drawing on this report, and we will look at a better enforcement of the rules. We want to facilitate most and importantly, cross-border trade, innovation and investment. Speaking of investment, as Mario Draghi pointed out, we need more investment, specifically more private capital. It is essential to ramp up also the private capital's investment in research and development. So we will work on a European savings and investments union because lots of the savings, was very impressive today to listen to Christine Lagarde, lots of the savings are not taken forward for valuable investments, but in the bank or in cash. So they could, if there is a more conducive environment for these investments, go to a deep and liquid capital market and leverage the wealth of these private savings. One other task to look at for not only closing the innovation gap, but also for the second priority, and that is to have a joint plan for competitiveness, decarbonization and digitalization. We have shown in the past that we can reduce our emissions while growing our economy, but we know that we have challenges to overcome. So in the first 100 days of the new mandate, we will propose a clean industrial deal. It will build on Mario Draghi's report and on the 10 different sector dialogues we have led in the past month to ask the industry, with a commitment to 2050 climate neutrality, what is it what you need to get to this goal? How can we support you in getting there? And the sum of it will be in the clean industrial deal. One major topic in it will be energy. Energy was a big topic today in the discussion too. We know that it was a huge challenge to overcome the energy crisis unleashed by Russia's war in Ukraine, but the energy prices are still structurally too high. They have to go down, and this is one of the tasks for the new Commission ahead of us. We discussed the topics grid and interconnectors and storage. Simpler, faster permitting for renewables will be essential here. The third and last priority I want to shed a light on is reinforcing our strategic security. We know that over-dependencies can quickly turn into vulnerabilities. And this is why stable and secure supply chains are needed to power the future of our economy. You all know the topic of critical raw materials. We know that by 2030, for example, at the end of this mandate, demand for some minerals will rise exponentially. So we need action now and coordination at EU level to secure this access. There are two ways to do this. One way is to diversify, so to have a trading partnership with other regions of the world so that we're not depending on one single supplier, but we have a diversified chain of supply of critical raw materials. The second is even more interesting, and that is the whole topic of the circular economy. If you recycle, you do not need to get new critical raw materials. And if you look at the latest development in the startups for recycling, it's fascinating to see how much they can take out of a product that would go to waste normally, and take out, again, these critical raw materials or other valuable resources and put them into the new cycle of production again. So way forward to follow up. I will stop here. It was a very fruitful discussion about the Draghi report and the roadmap forward. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madam President. The Prime Minister of Hungary, Mr. Orban, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. May I speak Hungarian, I suppose so. Tisztelettel köszöntöm Önöket.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for accepting our invitation. First of all, in the name of Hungary, I'd like to condemn the anti-Semitic actions that took place in Amsterdam. Us Hungarians find this unacceptable. You are now visiting a country, those of course who are foreign participants here, so you are visiting a city that has perhaps the largest synagogue of Europe and the country's largest Catholic cathedral within a stone's throw of each other. And this closeness and living together is a symbol of the Hungarian way of life. Hungary and Budapest is a site where various cultures meet, east and west, north and south, and we live together in peace and security. And I hope that Amsterdam will be able to achieve that once again in the future. Now, of course, you know that the European Council held an informal meeting here in Budapest, but not for the first time. Hungary has already been a host or rather a chairman of the council, but we didn't have an informal council at that time. So it was a special honor for us to play host to the leaders of Europe here. Now, of course, everybody knows that there are issues regarding which there are significant political conflicts between the European Commission and Hungary, and of course I have my own disagreements with the President of the European Commission, but Ursula von der Leyen is now our guest. We invited her, she accepted our invitation, and of course we are receiving her with due politeness and respect, and therefore there was no sharp disagreement or debate during today's meeting. We'll have our fights when we get back to Brussels. And of course, today's topic was competitiveness, and that is a topic where we are in full agreement in any case. The goal of the Hungarian presidency of the Council was to focus all our efforts on competitiveness. And the plan was to set up a competitiveness pact, an agreement, a Budapest Declaration, and through several months of intense work, we achieved that. I'd like to thank my colleagues who worked on this, and also the President of the Commission and all her colleagues, Charles Michel, my friend, and his colleagues, and Mario Draghi, who was responsible for drawing up the report on this issue. It took quite a lot of work to come to a document that we can all agree on, and that places competitiveness at the center of European activities for the coming years. the facts are well known. The growth of the European Union has been lower than that of China or the United States. Productivity is growing at a slower pace here in Europe than it is at our competitors. And the share of Europe in world trade is decreasing. European companies are paying 3 times as much for electricity than their competitors in the United States. And the ratio with regard to gas prices is 4 times higher. So it is no exaggeration to say that the Budapest Declaration calls for immediate action. Let me now go through some of the important elements of this declaration. First of all, we determined to carry out a simplification revolution. We will be reducing red tape, and as a first step, by the end of the first half of 2015, we will drastically reduce reporting obligations, which are quite a heavy burden on European companies. We also made a decision to adopt urgent measures in order to reduce energy prices. We decided to draw up a true industrial policy in the coming months, and we also agreed to, by 2030, ensure that 3% of European GDP is spent on research and development. A decision was made to fully implement the Capital Markets Union. The President of the Commission also mentioned that the savings of European households are much higher than those of American households. However, Europeans keep their money in the banks, and banks are just constitutionally not set up to finance risky high-tech investments. So we need to move bank deposits to the financial markets and essentially convince European citizens to move their money so that they can better be used for innovative economic solutions. So we will be taking steps to encourage that shift. We also decided to set up a European defense industrial base. We agreed that the focus of the next 5 years will be competitiveness, and we agreed that all upcoming legislative proposals will have to be accompanied by a competitiveness test in order to ensure that we are well informed about the impact of each new piece of legislation on competitiveness. The President agreed with members of the Council that we will regularly return to the issue of competitiveness at the meetings of the European Council. I'm quite optimistic at the end of today's discussions. It is quite clear that nobody is interested in managing a decline. We are all interested in making Europe great again. If the Americans have decided to make America great again, there's only one suitable, possible European answer to that: make Europe great again. Thank you.
We'll open the floor for questions, and we start with the Ratio.
Thank you. Razia Akoc, AFP News Agency. My first question will go to the European Commission President and the European Council Chief. I'm going to very quickly just mention that the conclusions of a European Council in Lisbon in March 2000 said the Union today has today set itself a new strategic goal for the next decade to become the most competitive and dynamic knowledge-based economy in the world. The same conclusions mention enhancing innovation, creating a friendly environment, removing unnecessary red tape. Why should Europeans believe that things will be different this time round? What was wrong then that is right now? And my question for European Commission President and for the host Prime Minister Orban, if he'd also like to comment on this. So Trump is returning. Is Europe ready for whatever trade measures, even trade war, that he might unleash this time round? Thank you.
So, should I start? Okay. First of all, we should not underestimate that since the dates you were mentioning, I'm speaking about competitiveness now, since the dates you were mentioning, enormous involvement, industrial research and development involvement has taken place. So it's not the same status as then. So today what we are doing, we're looking at the facts. How, for example, is our performance in different sectors? How is our performance in different measures? We see that we are good in, we have our strengths. I was mentioning it at the beginning. And we also have, for example, in innovation, a remarkable talent in Europe. For example, with the whole clean tech sector, we are world leading, so we have our strength. But I think it is also a question of clarity that we have to be sincere in describing our weaknesses, where we have to work and to improve things. For example, if you're speaking about red tape, how could you convince people that this time it's different? Measure us at our words. We will, for example, come with a so-called omnibus. Omnibus is you take from many different files topics to reduce bureaucracy, to reduce reporting burdens, and put them in one omnibus that you lead, then guide, we propose as a commission and guide them through the parliament and the council. So you have a huge approach to reduce in one step in all the different fields. What is agreed is too much today. We will look, for example, at the triangle taxonomy, CSRD, CSDDD. And important is, and this is something we agreed also in the informal council here today, the content of the laws is good. We want to maintain it and we will maintain it. But the way we get there, the questions we are asking, the data points we are collecting, thousands of them, is too much, often redundant, often overlapping. So it's our task to reduce this bureaucratic burden without changing the correct content of the law that we all want. The second question was, Victor, it was something with the two of us and I forgot the content.
How to negotiate with Trump on trade.
Ah.
Sorry.
Yes. So I think, first of all, engage. Very important. What we have started yesterday. Secondly, discuss about common interests. And there are common interests that we have. So, and then go into negotiations. Common interests are, for example, this is one topic that we touched upon. I would not say discussed, but we touched upon yesterday. It's the whole topic of LNG. We still get a lot of LNG via Russia, from Russia. And why not replace it by American LNG, which is cheaper for us and brings down our energy prices, but is something where we can get into a discussion, also what our trade deficit is concerned. So engage, look at common interest, and then negotiate.
Could I just add two comments? On the first point, I think we sent a message yesterday. We want to engage, and it's President Trump made this point as well, his willingness to engage. On your first question, competitiveness and what's changed, well, very briefly, for 5 years, over the last 5 years, the world has changed a lot, and the European Union has also changed a lot over that time. When, you know, a lot has changed since Jacques Delors came up with this great idea. At the time, we excluded telecoms, the financial markets, and energy. But over the last 2 or 3 years, there's a lot. We've seen a lot more political convergence on, you know, when it comes to what we can do together in order to boost our economic base. So there's now fairly broad consensus on this idea, the fact that, you know, energy may be a national competence, but we need to work together more on that to push energy prices down and to build interconnections. You know, I mean, energy is crucial when it comes to strategic security. And the same thing applies to financial markets. This is a lever that allows us to leverage investment, innovation, and the same applies to telecoms, AI, and digital affairs. Very briefly,
I think these issues dominated the European Council, which was not the case in the past. We want to have a paradigm, and we want to build an environment of trust in investors, amongst operators. You know, it's all very well having good intentions, but that brings with it a lot of bureaucracy. We need to change that around so that we can boost the competitiveness of our businesses. And this is very important. Viktor Orban gave us some examples. The figures show that we're lagging behind our partners and competitors, and now is the time to act. We've got the Letter report, the Draghi report, and these are messages, you know, really is a time for us to act. Thank you.
Mint egy veterán szeretnék kapcsolódni azon. As a veteran, into your statement about the targets we have set up in Lisbon. So it was more wide range that you have just mentioned here, because to be the most competitive area of the world was just the #1 target. But there were 2 others, just to help you to commemorate. To make Eurozone, I mean, to make Euro as a worldwide currency, and then that we create a biggest ever market from Lisbon to Vladivostok. So now time has changed. So these targets are not realistic anymore. So what can we do to set up new goals? And the answer to your question, what is the guarantee that these goals will be achieved, unlike the previous one? The answer is it depends on the leaders. It's a leadership issue. So if the leaders are good, they can achieve their goals. If the leaders are weak, they fail. So look at the Hungarian presidency. Yeah, the reason why I'm very much optimistic, look at the Hungarian presidency. Everybody said that, oh, we are isolated, Hungary is not loved, at least not liked. Sooner or later it will be a failure, it cannot be successful. Even the Budapest meeting will not happen because the leaders will not come. Or, you know the story. And what is the end of the story? The end of the story is that we are here. We cooperated very well. We had a fantastic summit, and we accepted a pact on competitiveness, which everybody said it's impossible to put together. We did so. So leadership issue. So we trust each other as good leaders. We're able to achieve all the goals we just have set up on competitiveness just now. So the answer is self-confidence. The same goes to negotiation with the President of the United States. It will be not easy. It will be a tough negotiation because obvious that he will come up with trade ideas, surely serving the interest of the United States more than the European interest. We have to stand up and we have to negotiate, and at the end of the day we have to make a deal. The question is how good we are, how strong we are, how innovative we are. If we are good enough, we will make a good deal. And I hope so we will.
Take a question from the Hungarian colleague Laszlo.
Good afternoon, Laszlo Mészáros from the Hungarian National Television. I'm asking a question of Prime Minister Orban. How long a time do you think will be required for this action plan to bear fruit? And in what way, to what extent can Hungary participate in achieving the results? I'd also like to ask you about any further plans for the Hungarian presidency after these 2 major diplomatic summits. I'll be brief. The Hungarian presidency is, of course, not over yet. This was a very good meeting with great results, but we still have some surprises in reserve for you. I'm not going to discuss them in detail now, but we still have 2 months, and I do hope that we will achieve significant results during that time. And as regards your first question, how much time it will take for the results to materialize based on the decisions made today, my answer is 6 months. By the 1st of July 2025, we'll have to stand here or somewhere together and report on what we have achieved of the objectives that we set today. We will have to report on which objectives we have achieved and which ones have been partially achieved, to what extent. I don't think we have any more time than that. Emmanuel Macron of France is a little more optimistic. He says we have 2 years to achieve these objectives. I think we have to do it in 6 months, and it is possible to achieve tangible results in 6 months.
Thank you so much. Henry Foy, Financial Times. Question to the two presidents. Do you think that the election of Donald Trump and the collapse of the German coalition has made it more likely that the EU will actually develop and implement these new financial instruments that leaders today agreed to only explore? And is pressure increasing on the countries that currently oppose these measures to drop that opposition? And to the Prime Minister, you've talked today about the need for unity in the EU and the need to unify around the competitiveness challenge to form a common European response. That's probably quite a surprise to the other leaders who often hear you talk about national sovereignty and the reason why governments need to be able to tell Brussels not to tell them what to do and ignore this federal approach to things. What's changed? Are you going soft?
President, I think.
Which one?
You.
Okay.
This is the last summit, I think. Take the plunge.
Okay. The question related to this decision that we intend to explore the new resources. What is at stake? In fact, I think that we know what we want to do and what we need to do and how we need to implement some measures to be more competitive and understand the urgency of the situation. But we know that at the youth level, but not only at the youth level, when you are talking about solidarity, financial solidarity, about money, is always difficult. And I would like to be careful, but we had some experience a few years ago with COVID-19. I remember that 2-3 weeks before we made a decision, we disagreed on the best financial tools to address the consequences of COVID-19, but finally we managed to make a decision. It's my first point. And my second point is the following. It's also based of my modest experience within this group of 27 leaders the last 10 years. I think this is important not to forget that solidarity, this both on the one hand is a question of financial support and financial means that we dedicate to reach some common goals. This is one part of the story. Another part of the story is related to the reforms, the structural reforms, so that the trust is guaranteed on both sides. And I remember that what made the difference a few years ago when we had an agreement on the multi-annual framework is trust. Is because you understood that through the tools that you are putting in place, it was not only a one-side approach. This was an approach based on the idea that solidarity is not only a question of money. This is a question of financial support, financial means, but also a question of what are the domestic reforms we are going to implement so that we guarantee more trust among us.
So I will answer this question independent of singular member states' developments. You were referring to the so-called new financial tools or innovative financial tools, where we agreed in the conclusions to explore them. And I think it was very clear, if I may one step backwards, we need more private investment, but this is on a different sheet of paper. We need more public investment. If we look at all the needs that are there, starting with security and defense, and going to the topic, for example, of supporting our innovative industries. The approach has to be very clear. We first have to define our priorities, indeed. And if the priority is that for certain military capabilities, we're not able to finance, and it's not smart to finance them individually and fragmented in 27 member states, but that it's much more better to finance them on a European scale, then we can discuss how we finance that. And you know my answer that there are two ways to do this. It is either contributions to the budget or new own resources to the European Commission. And both include, of course, that you raise capital at the capital markets. Very impressive was today Mario Draghi as well as Christine Lagarde, who described, of course, that the use of those innovative tools to improve the productivity in the European Union leads to more fiscal space, of our member states, and therefore a gain and not a loss if you move forward like this.
Okay, on the transformation you have just, the question of transformation you have just raised, being federal or national. You know that I'm a national guy. Unfortunately, to be national, it's not an accepted expression. So it's better to say patriot. You know, I'm a patriot. So that's how I look at the European institutions. But I promise not to open up any big arguments between us and Hungary. So I will not do that. But I just would like to underline that it was easy to make an agreement on competitiveness because it's not ideology. It's a very pragmatic thing. So my concept is that the European interest is nothing else, just the sum up of the interest of the all member states. So that's the reason why I was involved into establishment of a new group in the European Parliament called Patriots for Europe. Don't forget, not Patriots against Europe, Patriots for Europe. So we are European guy on national basis. And competitiveness is a good issue to make agreement even with the institutions of the European Union, which stands at this moment on different basis than we would like to see it. But anyway, that's for another occasion.
Lawrence.
Thanks a lot, Lawrence Norman of the Wall Street Journal. First of all, a question for the two presidents. Nice, simple one. Can Europe plug the gap in support for Ukraine if Donald Trump cuts off aid? Can it and will it? And a question for the Prime Minister. You are making an argument that the strategy on Ukraine is not there. And I think it's true to say now that there are other leaders who agree with you in a way that wasn't true in the past. They see the situation as difficult. They know Ukraine is not winning. But in June of 2022, months into the war, you were opposing sanctions on Russia, and you were opposing giving weapons to Ukraine. You wanted Russia unpunished and Ukraine vulnerable. How is that a pro-peace position? Isn't it simply a pro-Russia position?
So on the first part of your question, we have very carefully shaped the financial support for Ukraine. As you know, the 50 billion euro Ukraine facility that is there, and that we have now, in addition, the G7 loan that will give Ukraine already important relief until 2026. And you know that we have a fair share for every partner in the G7. They all contribute to this $50 billion loan that is given to Ukraine in addition. But what I think is more important that we discuss with our American friends also the fact that Russia is not only a threat to Europe, but a threat to the global security as a whole. Because Russia is not only an autocratic state, it is threatening democracies, but it is also increasingly becoming aligned with others like Iran, North Korea, and together with China, fueling this war. And I think this is an argument where we also have to be very clear with our American friends. We see that technology from China and Iran is used by Russia on the battlefield. This shows that the security of the Indo-Pacific and Europe are interconnected, and so are the European and the United States interests in this cause.
Two quick points on my side. The first point, since the beginning of this full-scale invasion, we've always been following one important principle: nothing about Ukraine without the Ukrainians. And this is still, I think, a very important principle for the future, point one. And point two, and it's not more than my own modest assessment and modest conviction, but I'm absolutely convinced on my side that if we would give the signal to the Kremlin that that we are weak. And if we don't understand that strengthening Ukraine is strengthening ourselves, then at the same time, we would give the one signal to other regimes across the world that could be tempted to violate the international law. It would mean that we are all vulnerable. That's why I think we have bold arguments, and I repeat that we intend to engage with all our allies, our partners, including, for sure, with the United States, so that we can make the right steps in the weeks and the months to come for a just peace which is based on the principles of the UN Charter, but again, nothing about Ukraine without the Ukrainians.
As I said earlier, that this is not the stage to explain the differences between the Commission, the Council, and the Hungarian position on the major issues. And it's obvious that Ukraine is an issue which we have different views. So I would not like to present here again the Hungarian opinion, just because you refer to the history. Just I would like to make some correction, if you don't mind. So my position was not expressed in July 2022. My position about this war was expressed first time 2022 March at the first council meeting, and it was exactly the same at that time, which is my opinion today. So there is no change at all. My estimation on the situation was exactly 2 years ago than it is today, and I had some forecast even that time how will we find ourselves, which situation 2 or 3 years later anyway, but this is not a discussion for that. But the Hungarian position is obviously a pro-peace position and the pro-Hungarian position as well. Don't forget that when the Ukrainian war has started, we launched the biggest ever humanitarian aid to Ukraine. So we have them, but we have no intention to be part of that military conflict, not in the slightest sense. So we remain in the field of humanitarians. Hungary is very tough on migration issue, as you know. But when the war erupted, we immediately opened the border for the Ukrainian refugees and let them to come, and we have them much. Hundreds of thousands arrived and got all the aid and help what they have needed. So I think we did very well with our limits, which stays and keep Hungary on the field of humanitarian cooperation and aid, and don't let the Hungarian to move closer to the war.
We'll take the last question and then we'll wrap up, Susanna.
Thank you, Susanna Fresh, SIC Portugal. Prime Minister Orban here. Actually, a follow-up. You said that you are not isolated, but you also said that you have different views when it comes to Ukraine. So my question is, do you feel isolated when it comes to Ukraine? And yesterday here in this same room, you were in favor of a ceasefire, and half an hour later, President Zelensky said that was not acceptable. So why do you think Ukraine should accept ceasefire, and why do you agree they should lose territory as well? And President Michel, well, do you think that you spoke about unity? Do you think that unity is at risk, especially now that President Donald Trump is back to the White House? And do you think that Antonio Costa will have a much more difficult task maintaining unity? Thank you.
I can start very briefly, because I made several times the same point. In fact, unity is never taken for granted. It requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of trust and mutual understanding and mutual respect. But I think that the European Council, we see the same challenges, and we understand what is at stake. We can see that the world is different. We can see more and more pressure on the multilateralism of the rules-based order. We can see war and conflicts all across the world, but including in our direct neighborhood. And we can see that a fundamental challenge for the future is related to what we have just discussed, competitiveness, so we can manage to strengthen our economic base. And I never forget that the promises of the founding fathers, peace, security and prosperity. This is our compass. And I trust that Antonio Costa, with his experience, and he knows very well all the colleagues, all the 27 countries and sensitivities. I trust that he will play a very strong role to manage to make sure that the European Council will remain the guardian of the European unity. And what we did today, what we have done yesterday, this working together, accepting the fact on some topics the starting points could be different, but at the end, you have seen that the last 5 years, we have managed systematically to agree on common conclusions. On difficult topics, but systematically, by consensus, we agreed on common conclusions.
Prime Minister.
Yeah, so on isolation, it's a more intellectual than political issue. So just to clarify, some clarification. So if you have an opinion and you are alone and 26 have a different opinion, it's not isolation. It's a discussion. That's democracy. And that's exactly how the Hungarian democracy was born. I do remember very well a conversation in my family in 88, when we established the anti-communist youth organization here in Hungary to destroy the communist regime and push the Soviet Union and Russian troops home, back out. I do remember 88. So everybody said, guys, you are crazy. Even in my family. It's impossible that in several years, I said it will happen soon anyway, that it could happen. So, you know, I was born in a face wind, politically meaning. So, you know, to be alone with my opinion and then to fight to convince the others to follow my opinion, it's the GLI. It's part of our DNA. So it's never perceived in Hungary as isolation. So when we have an opinion, when Hungary is different, like migration, 2015, Hungary was totally alone with the fence and with the concept that we have to stop the migration flow at the border. You know, we were totally alone, but we were not isolated. We were involved into the discussion. Being isolated means that you are not part of the discussion.
Y esto es lo que está dando de sí esta rueda de prensa tras el Consejo Informal de Jefes de Estado y de Gobierno de la Unión Europea, con Víctor Orbán asegurando que no tiene ninguna intención de que Hungría forme parte de este conflicto y que su posición es pro paz, y Ursula von der Leyen reconociendo que serán unas negociaciones muy difíciles con la Unión Europea. Una de ellas podría ser cambiar, en este caso, recibir gas natural licuado de Estados Unidos. Hacemos una pausa y volvemos de inmediato con más noticias aquí en Negocios Televisión, también con las declaraciones del canciller alemán Olaf Scholz. Hay mucho que contar sobre el posible adelanto de esos plazos para convocar unas elecciones.
¿Las soluciones de inversión tradicionales ya no cumplen con sus objetivos financieros? ¿La escasa rentabilidad y la volatilidad de los mercados le empujan a mantener los ahorros en su cuenta corriente? Si la respuesta a ambas preguntas es afirmativa, lo más probable es que esté pensando que la opción de no invertir es la óptima. Esta alternativa es quizás la más inmediata, pero ciertamente no parece la más rentable. Nuestros productos de generación de rentas están diseñados para ofrecerle el equilibrio adecuado entre seguridad y rentabilidad, con el fin de aprovechar todas las oportunidades del mercado. Hemos revisado nuestro enfoque tradicional, ampliando el espectro de oportunidades dentro del segmento de rentas para una inversión que le prepare mejor para el futuro. Y con la integración de los principios ESG, podemos ayudar a construir un futuro más verde para todos los inversores que buscan rentabilidad. No se conforme con la liquidez. Prepárese para el futuro con fondos de Invesco. Descubra más en invesco.es/income.
Mudarte de ciudad es un gran cambio y alquilar tu casa puede parecer arriesgado. ¿Estará tu vivienda protegida? Con SEAC, olvídate de preocupaciones. Nosotros garantizamos tu renta, pase lo que pase. Disfruta de tu nueva etapa con total confianza. Alquila tranquilo. SEAC responde.
Silver Gold Patrimonio nace en 2018 con el objetivo de innovar en el mercado de los metales preciosos de inversión, ofreciendo nuevas alternativas para que cualquier persona, familia o empresa pueda entrar en el fantástico mundo de los metales de inversión de forma sencilla y acompañada por consultores expertos en el sector. Silver Gold Patrimonio quiere avanzar contigo.
No puede volver atrás y cambiar el principio, pero puede comenzar donde está y cambiar el final. En Luna Sevilla queremos ser su asesor financiero de referencia para mejorar su presente y su futuro patrimonial, prestando nuestros servicios como agentes de Caser Asesores Financieros. Somos una empresa con una clara apuesta por la formación de calidad, la información transparente y objetiva, y por el asesoramiento financiero personalizado y continuado. Visite nuestra web lunasevilla.es o llame al 91 762 3442.
Y regresamos aquí en Negocios Televisión con Todo es Geopolítica. Recuerden en directo esa reunión informal de jefes de Estado y de Gobierno de la Unión Europea en Budapest, en la que están compareciendo en rueda de prensa el primer ministro húngaro Viktor Orbán, dejando importantes titulares sobre su posición sobre Ucrania y Rusia o la difícil relación que nos espera con Estados Unidos en Europa. También el presidente del Consejo Europeo, Charles Michel, a punto de dejar el cargo, y la presidenta de la Comisión Europea, Ursula von der Leyen. En estos momentos aparece el primer ministro húngaro Viktor Orbán.
And to Moscow as well, anyway. I was criticized heavily for that. I would not like to recall all the details. But what I have done in Ukraine, not to convince the Ukrainians to do something, I just tried to explain to the president that, please, my friend, the time is not on your side. And I'm ready to help you to create somehow a ceasefire and then later on a bearable peace. I was rejected because the president said that, Victor, this is not my point. My point is, as president of Ukraine, that the time is on our side. I said, thank you, President, I can't do more. So what I have done after that, realizing that neither of the warring parties is ready to make a ceasefire, and both of them are convinced that the time is on their side, I continue my efforts to organize a kind of international climate as broad as possible to create a pro-peace climate around the war, and then to influence the warring parties that sooner or later they have to have a ceasefire and then some negotiations, and to restore communication. So that's what I have done. I would never dare to say what should be done to the Ukrainians. Their country, their future, their lives, sovereign country. But I am ready to have them as many times because, as I did, because the neighboring country fought heroically and they deserve a better future than as it looked like just now. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We will wrap up here at the press conference and we'll invite the President and the Prime Minister for a joint photo for the press.
Ya acaba de terminar esa rueda de prensa, cerrando Viktor Orbán, el primer ministro húngaro, diciendo que no es nadie para decirle lo que debe hacer el pueblo ucraniano, señalando que su posición es de la paz, su posición es la de que ambos países lograran un acuerdo para un alto el fuego, pero cada uno cree que el tiempo está de su parte en este conflicto. Un Viktor Orbán en presencia de Ursula von der Leyen, la presidenta de la Comisión Europea, y del presidente del Consejo, Charles Michel, en su último acto, en su última comparecencia como jefe, como ostentando ese cargo. Ya saben que será en este caso sustituido por el portugués António Costa. Importante la relación que tendrá la Unión Europea a partir de ahora con Estados Unidos. Decía también Víctor Orbán que la relación con Estados Unidos no será nada fácil, ya que Donald Trump tiene unas ideas comerciales particulares, pero la Unión Europea debe mantenerse fuerte, permanecer en pie y negociar. La negociación es uno de esos puntos comunes sobre los que ha girado esta comparecencia entre los tres líderes, Ursula von der Leyen y Charles Michel, las autoridades comunitarias en este caso hablando y reconociendo que el viejo continente se ha quedado rezagado respecto a otras partes del mundo, que tienen que hacer más para seguir liderando otras cuestiones. Por ejemplo, hablaban también de su liderazgo en las energías limpias, pero hace falta mucho más para tener una posición de mucho mayor liderazgo. Esto es, recuerden lo que ha dado de sí esta comparecencia. Ahora se quedan con Todo es Geopolítica con Sergio Fernández.
Mantenerlo además hasta junio-julio. Eso fue un grave error. Porque si esa decisión la hubieran tomado hace un año, pues a lo mejor podrían haber puesto a Kamala Harris, les habría dado tiempo a sacarla de paseo, a llevarla a todos los mítines y tal. Pero recordemos cuando ya ha sido, Biden ya ha dicho yo no me presento, se presenta Kamala y tal. Recordemos que fue a la escalerilla del avión a recibir a los espías americanos, ese intercambio de espías que hubo entre Rusia y Estados Unidos, ¿no? Recordemos que Kamala Harris allí no pintaba absolutamente nada y quedaba como un pegote. Es decir, como es la candidata, tiene que estar aquí y aparecer en la foto. ¿Quién le roba el protagonismo de esa foto? Pues Biden, que Biden sí que está allí, que Biden es el presidente, y cuando de repente ya ha salido toda la gente del avión, Biden, claro, es que era por la mañana temprano, era de madrugada, ¿no? Biden se piensa que él está allí en el aeropuerto para coger el avión, entonces se sube al avión. Entonces, ¿de quién es la culpa de que haya ganado Trump? Pues aparte de sus virtudes, pues toda esta serie de fallos a la hora de no saber decir quién puede ser un candidato alternativo a Trump, ¿no? El mensaje que se ha lanzado durante el último año es: no tenemos a nadie mejor que a este señor para competir contra Trump. Y luego, en los últimos 3 meses, que hay que reconocer, o 4 meses, desde junio, hay que reconocer que es muy poco tiempo para vendernos la idea de que Kamala Harris es una candidata más o menos asequible y alternativa a Donald Trump. ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué digo esto? Porque durante los otros 4 años anteriores, los 3 años y medio anteriores, Kamala Harris ha estado escondida en un baúl. La han tenido escondida en un baúl, por lo que sea, porque han querido promover más a Biden, porque han querido insistir mucho en la idea de que Biden es el que está al mando, por lo que sea, pero Kamala Harris no era quien daba la cara. Y cuando da la cara resulta que todavía Biden le roba protagonismo. La única manera que yo creo que hubiera sido eficaz para, promover más a Kamala Harris es que Biden, ya que no está en sus plenas capacidades para ser candidato, pues tampoco está en sus plenas capacidades para ser presidente actualmente hasta enero. Hasta enero es presidente de Estados Unidos, pues entonces que la sustituya, ¿no? Que Kamala Harris asumiera el poder en ese momento en nombre o en el puesto de Joe Biden. Esa era la única manera en el que en estos 4 meses todavía podría haber dado la batalla, pero no ha sido así. La cuestión es que yo creo que quien dirige el Partido Demócrata pues son estas familias, ¿no? Los Obama, los Clinton, etcétera, y que al final algo me dice a mí que dentro de 3 años, o incluso menos, incluso antes, veremos quién va a ser la sustituta, insisto, la sustituta de Kamala Harris, y será muy probablemente quien pueda tener todavía alguna chance, ¿no? Alguna oportunidad para disputarle el puesto o a Donald Trump o dentro de estos 4 años a Vance o a quien se quiera presentar o a quien sea que van a presentar los republicanos. Y esa otra candidata, entiendo yo, que la única que puede hacerle sombra y que puede tener ciertas posibilidades de ganar puede ser Michelle Obama, ¿no? Porque así como Hillary Clinton se hizo bastante odiable o odiosa, yo no sé cómo decirlo, pero despertó bastantes odios y bastantes fobias entre los propios demócratas, Michelle Obama pues ha sabido cultivar una cara, un rostro mucho más amable. Entonces, ella todavía puede ser que tenga algún tipo de posibilidad frente al próximo candidato republicano. Pero ya digo, de momento habrá que ver qué pasa el 20 de enero y efectivamente a quien se le debe echar la culpa, entre comillas, aparte de a Trump de haber ganado, es, si queremos buscar culpables en el lado demócrata, pues son las personas que dirigen el partido y que han dirigido a Joe Biden en el último año, porque no tomaron la decisión hace un año de cambiar de candidato, de presentar a otro candidato distinto a Joe Biden. Se obcecaron en eso y ese ha sido el gran error.
Pues José, lo mismo te quiero preguntar.
Ay, juventud. Qué buenos años, ¿eh? Lo dimos todo bailando.
De Putin, en realidad el inspirador de Putin fue su antecesor, Yevgeny Primakov. Si nos leemos los libros de Primakov, que es un político, un diplomático muy experimentado, es la prehistoria de todo lo que ha venido después. Dugin es un hombre más bien metafísico y, de hecho, en sus artículos se queja del poco caso que se le hace y realmente es prácticamente nulo. Pero bueno, lo que íbamos, la culpa de todo lo que está pasando, evidentemente el pobre Biden no es culpable de nada. En ese estado, pues el pobrecito bastante tiene con ir a los sitios y no perderse en su marasmo mental. Pero la culpa, entre otras cosas, la tiene la inflación. La tiene que la vida en Estados Unidos es carísima e insoportable y que las clases medias han sido vapuleadas durante los últimos 4 años. Y que, bueno, el pueblo americano lo que quiere es volver a lo que tenían en los años 60, lo que tenían en los años 70, lo que tenían en los años 80, que no han vuelto a ello, pues, por una serie de políticas que consideran, pues, dañinas. Y, bueno, yo creo que un factor que no sé, se olvida muchas veces es lo difícil que es la vida para un americano de clase media sobrevivir. Entonces, y el muchísimo dinero que hace falta para llevar una vida medianamente decente en Estados Unidos. Y bueno, eso es algo que el Partido Demócrata ha ignorado supinamente, no le ha hecho el menor caso a la clase media. Tenía sus objetivos en Ucrania, en China, en yo qué sé, en Azerbaiyán, donde sea, menos en los hogares de su gente. Y esa especie de desprecio, de ignorancia o de, no sé, de poca atención a su gente es lo que ha llevado a la ruina a los demócratas, además por una verdadera paliza. No olvidemos que todos esperábamos un resultado ajustado y así una soberana paliza la que han recibido los demócratas. No es culpa de Trump, perdón, no es culpa de Harris, no es culpa de Biden, es culpa de una política sistemática de olvido de la clase media.
Pues clases medias de esta derrota de los demócratas, esta victoria aplastante que nos estaba contando José. Muchísimas gracias a los tres por estar con nosotros un día más. Abud, José, Antonio, muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. Un placer. Muchas gracias.
Un abrazo.
Buenas tardes. Nosotros que seguimos pendientes de la actualidad geopolítica, de contarles las últimas horas, también, por supuesto, mirando a Wall Street con noticias sobre Tesla, noticias también, ojo, sobre la empresa de Donald Trump. Hacemos una pausa y seguimos por la mejor programación en Negocios Televisión.
Recibes un mensaje alarmante de tu inquilino en el que te informa que no puede pagar el alquiler. No te preocupes, SEAC está aquí para ayudarte. Nuestro equipo te asegura que recibirás tu renta a tiempo. Con SEAC, tu renta está protegida. Recibes el ingreso en tu cuenta como siempre. Disfruta de la tranquilidad sabiendo que SEAC maneja el imprevisto por ti. Alquila tranquilo. SEAC responde.
Los porros pueden parecer inofensivos, pero golpean tu vida hasta destrozarla. Porque esto es lo que le pasa a tu familia, a tus estudios, a tus amigos. Los daños son para siempre. No dejes que los porros destrocen tu vida. Plan Regional contra las Drogas de la Comunidad de Madrid.
Silver Gold Patrimonio nace en 2018 con el objetivo de innovar en el mercado de los metales preciosos de inversión, ofreciendo nuevas alternativas para que cualquier persona, familia o empresa pueda entrar en el fantástico mundo de los metales de inversión de forma sencilla y acompañada por consultores expertos en el sector. Silver Gold Patrimonio quiere avanzar contigo.
¿Qué es Bitcoin? Hoy vamos a explicarles qué es exactamente Bitcoin, explicándoles los conceptos básicos para que entiendan esta criptomoneda de la que todo el mundo lleva años hablando. Esta explicación les servirá para saber también qué son exactamente las criptomonedas y cómo funcionan, para que puedan tener una noción un poco menos técnica de cómo funciona todo esto y a lo que nos referimos con cada término. Bitcoin es una criptomoneda o moneda virtual, concretamente la primera que fue desarrollada. Es la criptomoneda que le ha marcado el camino a todas las demás que llegaron después utilizando su tecnología. Esta tecnología es la cadena de bloques o tecnología blockchain, que también se utiliza para otras cosas. La primera de las criptomonedas fue creada por Satoshi Nakamoto, que es el seudónimo que corresponde a una persona que nadie sabe exactamente quién es, aunque sí que es cierto que ha habido muchas teorías. Esta persona publicó en 2009 un artículo en el que describía un sistema de pagos P2P al que llamó Bitcoin. Al cabo de unos meses, él mismo publicó la primera versión del software que permite gestionar la red de la moneda y que además empieza a interactuar con los primeros interesados en foros. La cantidad total de bitcoins que se emiten cada año está determinada por su algoritmo y pasa lo mismo con el resto de criptomonedas. Bitcoin está desarrollado para que cada 4 años se reduzca por 2 su producción y para que solo se emitan un total de 21 millones de bitcoins. Después simplemente dejarán de crearse. Esto es una diferencia fundamental con las monedas convencionales, puesto que los bancos modifican su valor a su libre albedrío. Por lo tanto, las monedas se pueden devaluar, mientras que Bitcoin quiere ofrecer algo más de estabilidad. En definitiva, entre los usos más destacados de Bitcoin cabe mencionar los siguientes, como por ejemplo pagar utilizando estas propias criptomonedas, obtener intereses por los Bitcoins que poseas, algo similar al concepto de un depósito bancario, también obtener un préstamo utilizando como garantía tus Bitcoins, cubrir tu exposición financiera con derivados.
Hello, I'm Michael Reinking, Senior Market Strategist at the New York Stock Exchange, and this is Market Storylines. Now, every week, we are here to keep you up to date on the key trends and events driving global markets. We are recording after the Fed's
básicos, tal y como estaba previsto, tal y como esperaba el consenso de los inversores. En este contexto, también dudas sobre China después de haber presentado un nuevo paquete de estímulos, en este caso para impulsar a las entidades locales y para acabar con el déficit al que se enfrentan. Vamos a mirar índices, vamos a mirar tiempo real en una jornada en la que, como decimos, pues todavía hay resaca postelectoral, resaca post-FED, pero pocos datos concretos del día que cotizar más allá de ese dato de confianza del consumidor que hemos conocido hace unos minutos. Miramos índices, miramos pantallas, miramos tiempo real a media sesión en Wall Street y cuando queda, como decimos, menos de media hora para que termine el día en la renta variable europea. Tenemos al S&P 500 en positivo, cotizando con una revalorización del 0,29%. Recordemos que los índices de Estados Unidos se mueven en terreno de máximos históricos, 5.990 puntos para el índice S&P 500. Si miramos al Dow Jones, vemos cómo se impulsa de nuevo con cierta intensidad. Es el índice que más revalorización acumula en las últimas semanas y lo vemos cotizando con una subida del 0,63% en un nivel nunca visto. 44.000 puntos formando parte de él desde hoy Nvidia. Si miramos por su parte al índice tecnológico Nasdaq, es el que va más renqueante en la jornada de hoy, lo tenemos en negativo, el 100 cotizando con un recorte del 0,20% en los 21.064 puntos. En cualquier caso, estamos hablando de un retroceso mínimo para el selectivo tecnológico. Miramos también ahora a las compañías europeas, índices de renta variable del viejo continente, donde sí vemos caídas más acusadas. Vamos a mirar al IBEX 35 y vemos cómo el selectivo madrileño cotiza con tendencia negativa, aunque con caídas bastante moderadas, bastante mínimas para el selectivo madrileño. Miramos al IBEX 35 y enseguida vemos cómo está cotizando. Lo hace con un retroceso del 0,28%, pero perdiendo ese nivel de 11.600 puntos en el que cerró en la jornada de ayer. 11.536, pero como decimos, es el índice europeo que menos retrocede, porque, por ejemplo, vemos caídas superiores al 1% para el CAC 40 de París, que pierde un 1,15, 7.339 puntos. Caídas también de medio punto porcentual para Milán, que pierde un 0,55% hasta los 33.793 puntos. Y en el caso del Reino Unido, la bolsa británica, el FTSE 100, retrocede un 0,89 y cotiza en los 8.068 puntos. Eso está pasando en el mercado de renta variable. Vamos a mirar también la cotización del mercado de renta fija después de haber visto en las últimas horas moderación en esos repuntes de las rentabilidades de los bonos que vimos tras la victoria de Trump. Vamos a ver ahora mismo los principales bonos soberanos, cómo están cotizando en tiempo real. Vamos a ver ese bono americano a 2 y a 10 años. El 2 años lo vemos en el 4,22. El bono americano a 10 años ha experimentado un bajón importante, 4,28%. También bajando el yield británico, 4,4%. Y es intensa en este momento la caída del Bund alemán, después de que el canciller Olaf Scholz, se lo vamos a contar ahora de forma más pormenorizada, haya abierto la puerta a convocar elecciones anticipadas en el corto plazo. Bajonazo importante vemos en el Bund alemán, que cotiza en el 2,36%. Por último, bono español a 10 años. Vamos un poquito para abajo y vamos a ver cómo está cotizando en tiempo real el bono español a 10 años. Lo tenemos también experimentando un retroceso importante y situándose en el 3,1%. Miramos ahora a la principal criptomoneda, el Bitcoin, que continúa con esa intensa escalada tras la victoria de Donald Trump. Estamos hablando del activo que más se está viendo afectado en positivo, en este caso por la victoria del líder republicano. Tenemos al Bitcoin por encima de los 76.500 puntos, consolidando máximos históricos, avanzando en esos niveles, avanza un 0,84% en tiempo real, 76.561 puntos. Continúa también esa tendencia alcista en el resto de criptomonedas. Tenemos a Ethereum subiendo un 1,6 en los $2.944 la onza, al borde, dólares, al borde de los $3.000, aunque en este caso todavía alejado del terreno de máximos históricos. Eso es lo que está pasando en tiempo real en el mercado. Vamos a actualizar la información, lo vamos a hacer en los próximos minutos aquí en Rolling Stocks. También vamos con el análisis. Quédense con nosotros. Y empezamos hablándoles de Tesla. La compañía no afloja y sigue celebrando en bolsa la victoria de Donald Trump, que previsiblemente beneficiará al fabricante de vehículos eléctricos por los aranceles que planea sobre los coches chinos y por su afinidad con Elon Musk, fundador de la compañía y reconocido amigo del nuevo presidente de Estados Unidos, que de hecho puede tener un papel protagonista en su nueva administración. Las acciones de la compañía están subiendo en tiempo real casi un 6% y acumulan ganancias superiores al 20% en la semana. Concretamente, en los últimos 5 días se revaloriza el título de Tesla cerca de un 29%, un 28,4%. Esta situación ha llevado a la compañía a superar en los últimos minutos el $1 billón de capitalización. En tiempo real, como decimos, tenemos los títulos de Tesla subiendo un 5,6%, cotizando en $313,75. Y también hay que destacar que las acciones de Trump Media también continúan disparadas, continúan escalando tras la victoria del magnate. Hoy suben después de que Donald Trump haya asegurado que no se irá del accionariado de la compañía de comunicación. Y vamos a ver cómo están cotizando en tiempo real las acciones de Trump Media. Lo hacen también con una subida de nuevo cercana al 10% hasta los $30,29. Las compañías de Trump Media en los últimos 5 días se encuentran en tablas, pero es que venían de unos niveles especialmente bajos. Y de compañías a las que les está yendo muy bien, como es el caso de Tesla y de Trump Media, que están siendo protagonistas de la semana, marcadas por la victoria electoral de Donald Trump, a compañías que continúan pinchando y que tienen que ver en este caso con el sector del lujo. Richemont, la dueña de Cartier, ha obtenido un beneficio neto atribuido que no ha gustado a los inversores. 458 millones de euros, lo que supone una caída del 69,6% en comparación con los 1.505 millones del ejercicio anterior. El resultado operativo ha mostrado un descenso del 12% a tipos de cambio constante hasta alcanzar 2.200 millones de euros. Así que este es un ejemplo más de que el sector del lujo no termina de levantar el vuelo. La última firma en decepcionar al mercado ha sido ella, Richemont, tras conocer unos resultados del primer semestre de su año fiscal que no han alcanzado las expectativas del consenso del mercado y mostrar una mayor desaceleración de las ventas. Así que esto lleva a las acciones de la compañía a perder casi un 6% en bolsa, un 5,7%, y arrastrar a otras compañías del sector como Louis Vuitton, Moët Hennessy, que pierde un 3,5% hasta los $297,20, y que contagia a otras compañías como Christian Dior, que retrocede más de un 3%, o Hermès, que pierde en tiempo real en los últimos minutos de cotización para la renta variable europea casi un 4%. Y vamos a irnos ahora a la cumbre de Budapest. Los líderes de la Unión Europea se han comprometido hoy a tomar medidas para mejorar la competitividad de su economía frente a potencias como Estados Unidos o China. Una necesidad ya asumida por el bloque, que se hace más acuciante con la llegada de Donald Trump a la Casa Blanca. Los jefes de Estado y de Gobierno de los 27 celebran en la capital de Hungría una cumbre informal en la que están analizando las recomendaciones emitidas por el ex primer ministro italiano Mario Draghi para mejorar la productividad de la economía y del sector industrial de la Unión Europea, apenas días después de una victoria del magnate republicano que hace temer a la Unión un recrudecimiento de las políticas proteccionistas de Estados Unidos. Sobre su primera conversación con Trump ha hablado precisamente la presidenta de la Comisión Europea, Ursula von der Leyen.